Hey, what's up, guys? As always with these, I guess I'll call this one a supplemental as well. I try to make them as brief as possible. I'm hoping this one will clock in right around 10 minutes. Anyways, get right into it. Before we do that, fair warning, I am at my house. I'm trying to do this earlier in the morning so I can get it to you at a decent time today because YouTube is not instant. All that is to say, my kids are around. I may well be interrupted. Anyway, all right. So if you will, pull up a couple things for me right to start with, and you can pause this to do that. You're going to need your paper 3 prompt up, the proposal prompt up, and if you want, here at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about your homework for next time. That's on Course 10. You can look at that as well. Anyway, I'm boiling everything down we would have done in class into a much smaller video. Okay, so the prompt for paper 3. What paper 3 is, if you're looking at that, and I'm sorry. Well, the prompt is, or the way I characterize it, this is an actual research paper. Many of you probably have written a research paper before in high school. However, it was much more like what we call the informative synthesis, which is to say, what you've written before is not a research paper. It's a report. The difference here is that you're going to make your own argument. You're going to back it up with research, but you are running the show, as opposed to what you did in the informative synthesis, which was mostly wading through, tying together other people's arguments, organizing information. You still do a lot of that. You use all those skills, which is why I have you do that paper before this. But someone's just clanging metal around. People enjoy their own things. Anyway, so the source text. I'm walking right through the prompt here first. It's up to you, pending my approval. We have a proposal, which I'm going to talk about next. You propose a source text that you want to write about. I like to do this for the last paper. I feel like I've brought things to you that I enjoy for different reasons and I want to talk about. But here in the last paper, I like to open it up and say, what do you want to talk about? I've had all kinds of cool papers in the past. I think for a lot of students, it really is an opportunity to use something that you know a little bit about, but also, again, my assumption is you're more enthusiastic about, right? Like, oh, this is my thing. I could really talk about this. Suburban life. Anyway, length. You're kidding me. Oh my God. Mother. All right, so we're back. The guy next door has a lot of machinery that he just likes to run. I've never seen him do much with it. He just likes to make sure it works, makes noise. Anyway, where were we? Oh, the length of the paper, 5 pages. Again, that's longer than anything we've written to this point by a page. But with all your wonderful thoughts about your source text, whatever that might be, with all your research, I don't think you'll have a problem hitting the 5 pages. Of course, that doesn't count the works cited. Percentage of your grade, that percentage might be off. I'm just noticing that. I think it's 25. Anyway, it's more significant on the prompt. It says 30. I'll have to double check the syllabus, but same format as always. Final draft, 7:23 by midnight. Today is the 5th, so just under 20 days, 18 days, which is a good bit of time. But you think about what your process, right? We talked about this with paper 2. You're going to have to pick a source text, watch or read or whatever that source text. He's got chains now. He's like a ghost, you know? Anyway, you have to have time to do that and do some thinking about that. Then you got to maybe have like another, I wouldn't say week. We don't have a week, unfortunately, during the summer, but a couple days for research. Then you sit down to write the thing. So really, best case scenario, you might have 2 weeks, week and a half to write the paper. And I know that can feel like a bit of a crunch. Although, if you guys are honest with yourselves, think about how long you actually spend sitting down to write a paper. Most of you, I don't think it's been a week. I don't think you guys have spent a whole week on a paper for the most part, you know? Not pointing fingers, just saying. So all that is to say, you have a lot of time if you use it wisely. And that really is the name of the game during the summer. What the assignment is, I've talked about that already. And there's stuff here on the prompt for you to look at. But again, the way I describe it It's a combination of papers 1 and 2. So paper 1 was you and a text making an argument. You're doing that here. Now, the parts we take from paper 2 is all the research. Occasionally, you may find an article or two that agrees with some of the points you're making. That's great. You know, you pull some quotations in that regard. You may find an article that disagrees in some way, shape, or form with one of your ideas. Pull that and do your best to disprove it, you know? And there's always a mystery third option. But again, you're using the research in this case to bolster your own ideas. That's why it's a research paper. That's how you actually are meant to use research. Source requirements at the bottom. It says 5 to 7 sources. That's counting your source text. So like if I was writing a research paper about Die Hard, which just to be clear, you can't do because we've done that already. That'd be one of my sources. So then I want you to have 4 other research sources, articles. It says they have to be scholarly here. Again, I've kind of opened that up just this semester. So they don't have to be scholarly. I would highly recommend most of them be scholarly though. And what that means is, it feels like I'm haunted by that fucking guy. Anyway, what that means is you'd find them on the library website, on Galileo mostly, or any of those other databases we talked about. They would need to be peer reviewed. Anyway, I advise you to choose scholarly sources for the most part because they are concerned with making arguments, which is you're gonna get way more mileage out of an argument than you are like a movie review. Or I saw some weird sources from some of you in the last paper recently with like BuzzFeed articles and stuff like that, like lists. That's not going to help you. That doesn't make any sense. So find articles that make real arguments like the ones we're talking about in class. I have a suggested thesis down here at the bottom, just like we did with paper 2. And I'll read it to you and then I'll talk about what it means. A lumberjack is the best representation of contemporary masculinity. That'd be a nice working thesis if you, whatever text you chose, one of the main characters maybe was like a lumberjack. Obviously that feels like super masculine in some classic sort of way like we've talked about. But that's really vague, right? When you say a lumberjack is the best representation of contemporary masculinity, immediately my question is, why? What about him specifically? And how do those specific details make him this representation of modern masculinity? Like what values does he espouse? What qualities does he exude? I say he, I mean, hell, it's 2021. It could be a lady lumberjack, you know? But again, like the question that undergirds everything we're doing is, what does any of this say about us as a people, a society, a culture? That's what we're trying to do. And if you can do that, in this case, with a lumberjack, awesome. Okay, we'll talk about late stuff later. I mean, pretty much, I'll just tell you right now, there's a late paper policy on here. But again, I didn't even think about the fact this is during the summer. I wouldn't be late. And if you are, I wouldn't be very late because the summer semester ends pretty much damn near when this is due. So just be on time. Anyway, that's all for the paper 3 prompt. As always, if you have questions, you absolutely hit me up. And I will possibly touch on some of this Wednesday's class when we're actually allowed to meet. All right, so the proposal prompt. The date is wrong on this one. Let me see. It's actually the 12th. You always go by the syllabus. I'll update some of this stuff. Anyway, length, I say at least 500 words. Be in the neighborhood of 500 words. It doesn't have to be exactly 500 words. Format, I say, is MLA. I've softened on that as well. If you want it to be MLA, that's fine. But what the assignment is, again, there's stuff here to read, and I highly recommend you do it if you have questions after I talk at you about it. But basically, you're taking whatever text you think you want to write about for the paper, and you're telling me why. Now, what this means, usually, people start with, I really want to write about this because I think it's awesome. That's great. I hope so. Like, I hope whatever you pick is something you really enjoy, because that's just going to make the paper more fun, right? Like, more interesting to you. do that. But with an eye toward actually helping you think about what you're going to do in the paper, you can't just say, I think this is great. In fact, I would dissuade you from spending much time on that. Maybe that's your first sentence or two. This is awesome because, meh, and then stop. Stop after 2 sentences. And for the rest of the proposal, do your best to talk to me about trying to answer that question. What does your text say about us as a people, society, a culture? What does it say about our values or our motivations or how we see each other or how we work as a people? That's kind of a big question, that last one, but anything like that at this stage, which will be hard because you probably haven't thought about it very much, but I just want to get that process started, right? That's what your proposal is. You're basically saying, look, I can start to make an argument out of this text. And if I feel like you can, you've kind of proven that to me in the proposal, then I will approve it and you'll be good to go. And then you can start your research and all that stuff. I give you some criteria in the prompt, trying to help you be specific, okay? So for instance, whatever text you choose, okay? I usually mention movies because that's what most of you do, because it is 2021, no one reads, things like that. But whatever you end up choosing, you want to be as specific as you can. So I advise you here to do things like pick a character or kind of character. I also advise you at some point, if you choose a TV series, because some people will do that, you can't write about the entire series. You pick like at most 2 episodes, which can be difficult, but again, it's not nearly as hard as talking about like 30 episodes. You can't do that in 5 pages. That's bananas, right? So the name of the game with the proposal and with the paper is to be as specific as possible. Really pare down your character list. If you're going to talk about 2, for instance, like 2 probably max, right? Like you really want to focus this 2 episodes max. If you pick a movie, some people, oh man, I've had people, like one time somebody wanted to write about all the Harry Potter movies. I was like, there's like 7 or 8 movies in 5 pages. Like, what are you talking about? You pick 1 movie, right? Things like this. And the other thing here, there's a note. You can go over 500 words if you want. You don't have to, but if you, what I would hate is for somebody to be like on some kind of a roll, or could you be surprised sometimes with an assignment like this, just sitting down to write about it, you might make some discoveries in proposing it to me. Go for it, keep writing, see what you come up with. I don't mind if you go over, like, as with the bibs, this is mostly for you. It's to get the process started in your head, get you writing, and the only way I can make you do that is to make it homework. So, okay, that's the prompts. Last thing I want to talk about, we're right at 10 minutes, so we'll be done soon. The brainstorming. Brainstorming. So, I wanted to give you guys a couple examples, and this is admittedly a little bit difficult for me because we are very different, probably. Like the things I've seen and the things I think of when I think of this assignment, like what I would write about, probably not what you would think of, okay? So I've interspersed a couple things I just came up with off the top of my head right before I sat down to do this. I've tried to throw in a couple that like students have given me in the past that might resonate more with you. But anyway, the example I've given a couple times, actually, on Coursed-In and in different places. Ron Swanson, I don't know if you're familiar with Parks and Rec. Excellent show, by the way, but it's a couple years old. Ron Swanson's the character. He is the guy, the picture on the front of our Coursed-In page, the dude like covered in sawdust, and that is Nick Offerman, but he plays Ron Swanson, and that character is pretty well embodied in that picture, and the elements in that picture that you would look at and go, well, that's a masculine guy. That's pretty much how that character is in the show. He's really crafty, right? Like he's a handyman type of guy. He's a middle manager in government, but he hates government. He's hardcore libertarian, like in a cartoonish way that's like not realistic at all. And of course it's a comedy, so I think they play up some of that stuff for comedic effect. But they do that with a lot of his masculine qualities too. So immediately I'm like, well, why is that stuff funny? That'd be the first like one of my questions to really get me going if I was going to write about that character. Like, they clearly want you laughing at this stuff. Well, why? On the surface, you could say they're ridiculing some of those qualities, and they are, you know, for sure. But I don't think that's all they're doing. Not least of which because later in the series, Ron Swanson does, he becomes more of an actual person. Like, he gets a family, and he kind of opens up. He's much more caring, and it's, there's some straight up, like, moving moments with that guy, you know, that he wouldn't have had in the first couple seasons. So that's interesting too, that he gets this dramatic sort of side to his character. And again, you could argue kind of undercuts some of those more stereotypical depictions he embodies early in the series. So why do they make those choices, right? Why do they? One other question would be, why do the people that make the show want you to see this character move on this arc, right? Like, what might they be suggesting about the modes he was operating in terms of, like, he's hyper masculine. He's not masculine, he's hyper masculine. How that stuff works. Does it preclude certain activities or certain behaviors? That's a fancy word for, like, not allow. Does it not allow him to do certain things that he's able to do now because you see him soften in a way? Does it make you more of a person, like a human being, to soften in a way? What's the argument there? These questions start to open up, right, with that kind of a character. Other things I've had in the past, I had a girl years ago write a pretty solid paper about Shrek. I imagine most of you are familiar with that film. My first son loved it when he was little, so I've seen it a ton. That one and the second one are doing a lot with masculinity generally, but more specifically, like, the hero's tale. You know, we talked about Die Hard and what a hero is supposed to be, and Shrek isn't like an action movie, but it's like a fantasy movie, right? And it very, very clearly makes fun of a lot of that stuff, and again, ridicules it in a way that comedies do. But every time you're ridiculing something, like, you're almost never strictly just trying to tear it apart. Like, you're pointing to some truth in it, some real thing at the bottom of it, but you're kind of pointing at a bunch of stuff, a bunch of superficial things kind of layered over it that are maybe a little bit silly, right? And I think Shrek, in thinking about heroic expectations, you could argue is doing a lot of similar work to Die Hard, actually. Now, that's a weird thing. Like, Die Hard's a lot like Shrek, but you think about some of the things we've said about Die Hard recently, and you go back and you think about Shrek for 5 minutes, they're not so different, actually. They're saying a lot of things about the genre and about the characters we're used to, and what that might mean, that we only ever have those kinds of characters, you know? Fiona, right? When she gets her real form, spoilers, but when she gets her real form and you find out it was her all, like, it wasn't the pretty girl, it was that's saying some things about how women are depicted in movies like this, right? In stories like this. It's doing a lot, actually. Anyway, a couple more and then we'll finish. I just wrote down The Birdcage. I don't know if any of you have seen that movie. I've seen it a couple times. It's my wife's favorite movie. It's a really good movie, but we watched it recently, and it's about a gay couple in Miami and their son, and it's a comedy, though. It's got Robin Williams in it and Nathan Lane and a couple other people. It's really good, but it's absolutely saying some things about masculinity that's really interesting, but you probably haven't seen it. Fight Club, if you're familiar. I used to teach this movie. I taught it for I don't know, a handful of years, and then I just, at some point, you got to do something else, so I started teaching Die Hard. Fight Club is an interesting film because I've had students come at me after we talked about it, and we're like, I had no idea it was doing what it's doing, but just after we talked about it, they kind of come around. On its surface, it's a movie about fighting. Fight Club. But it's all these guys who get in a basement and kick each other's asses. And on the surface, I had students thinking, you know, oh, well, this is all about how awesome masculinity is and what you should be like, because Brad Pitt's character in that movie is really charismatic and how he talks about these things. But after we talk about it for like a day, most students come around to my thinking, which is, again, the movie is kind of sarcastic. Like, it's a little bit ironic at times. Like, it's making fun of that stuff, actually. And I don't have time to get into it, but if you've seen the movie, it absolutely, I think, is actually trying to show how ridiculous that view is, which is kind of wild because that's the entire movie. Like, it's kind of making fun of itself in a way, which is interesting. Two more, and then I'll finish. One that I get a lot of the Marvel movies, because that's most of what you guys probably know, because they were really big sort of in your life, short as it's been to this point. Those are really good. Again, I advise you to pick one. I always have people I want to do all the Avenger. You want to do all the Avenger movies? All the Avenger movies. What is wrong with you? Even if you pick one, what are they, like 3 hours? No, pick one and then do your best, because a lot of them are kind of long already. All the Avenger movies. But hey, if you pick one, my advice would be usually a lot of them, because I mean, it's the Avengers, so it's a team. It's an ensemble cast. That can be kind of difficult because people always want to deal with all the characters, and again, that's just too many. So I would focus on one or two at most. You may also think about, they all have like their own movies. There's a couple Iron Man movies. There's a couple Captain America. Like, pick one of those maybe that focuses on a single character. That may actually help. And then you can dig into them in the same way that we've talked about. Lastly, actually, all right, so two more. This is reminding me of another thing. But I'll always get movies like, I'm trying to offer you guys all kinds of suggestions. I'll get movies about specifically black masculinity, like it'll be a black main character. And not just Marvel with like Black Panther, but like, there's all kinds of movies. And inevitably I'll get the thesis. This is like an uplifting story where it shows what's possible for this black main character, and that's true. But in those especially, I found, I'll say 9 out of 10 of those movies that have been recommended to me, that is one argument that's being made, and you could say this with any movie, but there's an argument under it which I always find interesting, and it's this idea that, like, well, it does say that these black characters can achieve something or do whatever, but it's always interesting to me that, like, their menu seems way smaller. Like, think about all these movies, and they have like some, like, the music swells at the end and they have some kind of triumph. Aren't they all like, this guy's really good at basketball, or this guy gets a music career? Or if that's all, though, if that's all these characters are ever allowed to do, aren't we still talking about like I make the joke sometimes, like, where's the movie with a black character who just like, I'm just really into computers? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a little unsettling that you have this kind of character who these movies are telling you succeeds, but then when you compare him to other kinds of movies, you're like, well, his menu of success is I know you guys heard that. Anyway, his menu of success is really limited. So we kind of take that beginning argument about success and we tweak it a little bit. Again, we get more specific. What does that success look like for this kind of character? And then we can start to wonder, what might that say about who this character represents in our culture? What does that say about our culture? All right. Lastly, oh my God, they're so loud. Anyway, I'm almost done, I promise. Lastly, you don't have to just do movies. I know I've named like a bunch of movies and TV. I've had people write about books in the past. Thinking about black masculinity specifically, I had a girl a couple years ago do a really good paper on a guy named Young Thug. I'm not super familiar with his music. That's just not what I'm into. But I know who he is, and she, this is back when I used to do presentations. She was obviously very clearly into him. She gave a really good presentation, and my advice to her was like, you know so much about this guy. When it comes to your paper, your struggle is actually going to be scaling it back. Like, you're giving us so much, you can't work with all of that. So depending on what you guys pick, be it movie, TV, musical act, anybody. I mean, I've had people write about the Old Spice commercials. Those are great. Whatever you pick, bear in mind, you have to be specific, not just in terms of your focus, but in some cases, especially if it's something you're really into, your information. You don't want to write me a 5-page report where you just spill out all this stuff that you know about this thing. That information is where we start, right? Each body paragraph, your evidence, that's a little bit of information about a thing. The bulk of your work, 70% of your work plus, is argument about that information. So don't drown yourself in evidence. Don't drown yourself in that stuff. Going forward, just looking forward to next time. The brainstorm, I just try to give you maybe too many examples of. That's your discussion post. I want you to, at least for that assignment, even if right now you're like, I know exactly what I'm going to write about. Great. But for the discussion post, I would like you to do at least 2 or 3 possibilities, not just for you, but for your classmates. Some people will watch this video and by the end go, I have no idea what to do. For those folks, I would advise you, once there's some posts, go to the discussion board, see what other people have said. Chances are very good you won't take one of their ideas, but reading a few people's posts, I always hear from students, they're like, oh, that reminded me of this thing, or that made me think about this thing I saw a couple years ago. That's what it's for, right? Today, all I really want you guys doing is helping yourselves, but also helping each other. Just get the process going. This is what we do with every paper. And last thing I'll say, I think I said this in class the other day, but also in terms of giving yourself some options, you really have no time to get a hold of your text, unfortunately, because it is summer. So what I would also advise you during your process when it comes to like picking a text, before you write your proposal, go and make sure you can get it. People don't really own movies these days, for instance, for the most part. So if there's something you really want to write about and you're like, I really like that movie, look it up. Is it on Netflix or Hulu or something you have access to? If not, can you buy it kind of cheap and get it really quick, like electronically? Or can you rent it once or twice? Because you probably have to watch this thing more than once. And can you do that cheaply, again, electronically or whatever? Like make part of your process in choosing a text availability. It's going to help you out a lot, because the time you have to wait to get a hold of a thing is going to take time away from everything else, and that's just not time well spent. All right, so this went way over. It kind of always does. I just stopped promising links. Sorry about that. I hope that was informative. As always, like I said, if you guys want to shoot me some questions, I'll be happy to deal with those as they come. Otherwise, I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you.